My name is Alizée Marceau. I'm not a researcher, that's probably the first thing to mention. I've been working for the past 7 years with the Sustainable Food Places project, which is a charity-run program. Through this project, I had the chance of working on an impact assessment project called Making the Case and Measuring Progress towards a systems approach to healthy and sustainable food. So Geraldine did a quick introduction, but I'm going to do a whistle-stop tour of what Sustainable Food Places is, because this is to contextualize the impact assessment framework. So Sustainable Food Places is a network of local food partnerships across the UK. We are working directly with these partnerships and their local stakeholders, so local authorities, charities, universities, civil society organizations, and local businesses as well. So this framework, the impact assessment framework I'll be presenting, was really directed at serving these local food partnerships and helping them achieve their goals. So there are now over 60 members of the network, which has been running since 2013, so it's fairly recent, and it's run by these 3 charities: the Food Matters, the Soil Association, and Sustain. So as a place-based system, it's also built on a systems approach to food, which is illustrated by 6 key issues, which you can see here on the screen. So each of these key issues is further broken down into a series of actions. So very practical actions that essentially contribute towards achieving these key issues. So I wanted to mention this here because these actions, these are just examples on the screen, but all of these actions are used as proxy indicators in the impact assessment framework that we'll go into now. So this project, this evaluation project, was a year-long, very much action research project between 2015 and 2016, and we had workshops with over 100 practitioners. So it was funded by the ESRC, and we collaborated with Cardiff University and with Dr. Anna Moragues-Foss, who's now working at the University of Barcelona. So the 2 main goals of this framework, of this toolbox, was first of all to provide local authorities and decision makers with a clear set of evidence and indicators of the success of a place-based systems approach to food. So really give them that reassurance that the actions undertaken by local food partnerships had significant impact. So that was the first aim. And the second aim was, of course, to help these practitioners to undertake, to help them implement their projects on the ground. So through the Sustainable Food Places program and the 6 key issues approach that we saw before. So as with all of the other projects presented so far, we worked within a number of constraints, the main one being the very limited resources that were available locally within these local food partnerships to undertake any kind of evaluation work, especially data gathering, etc., as Elodie was mentioning just before. So we decided to try and take a different approach to avoid getting too much into data collection. So we developed a conceptual framework. So you'll see that none of this is designed up. It's very much very simple graphs, because we didn't have any resources to do any graphic designing. So it doesn't look very professional, I'm afraid, compared to everything that we've seen so far. But the conceptual framework, we started in these workshops by identifying a series of key goals. So these are essentially, these goals are what characterize what we considered characterized a sustainable food place. So this was discussed at length with the workshop participants, and it was categorized under the health and well-being, economy, and environmental themes, with an overarching one on governments that had its own kind of separate existence, separate indicators, etc., separate goals. So the idea of using these health, economy, and environment was mostly to encourage decision makers to more easily relate to these goals. So, and make the link between what they were doing on a day-to-day basis in their work and the goals that local food partnerships were trying to achieve through their various projects. So we identified these goals, first of all, and then we further refined them into a series of potential indicators for success. So these are the meta indicators here. So these are just examples. There are a few more in the actual toolbox. So the idea was to identify a set of indicators that would show the success towards achieving these key goals, these key outcomes. So once we had these both of these goals and meta indicators, so this is what the framework looks like as a whole. So the next step was, once we'd identified these meta indicators, we wanted to link these up with a number of levers for change. So these are actions for the achievement of the meta indicators and ultimately the key goals. So these actions are what I referred to earlier, the actions that form the Sustainable Food Places 6 key issues framework. So these list of actions, we'll go into it now. These actions are, for example, the ones that we can see here on this table. So I've taken an example under infrastructure and planning. So for example, the council works to prevent the development of food deserts and food swamps. So that's an example of local action undertaken by a number of local food partnerships. So the idea was to use these actions as proxy indicators. The aim being that we wanted to show that undertaking these different actions contributed to progress against the meta indicators and the key outcomes that we'd identified. So the way we did this was to underpin these proxy indicators by a series of evidence. So that's published research and advisory documents that make the case for this link, that make the case for the impact of these activities. And we also tried to show the transversal and cross-cutting impacts of these actions. So you can see at the bottom of the table, there's an action that cuts across health, economy, and environment. In the whole table, if you go and see the toolkit, you can see that some of them are more oriented towards just health and economy, others economy and environment. It's just to try and illustrate this systems approach. So let's look a bit more at this evidence. So what's circled in red here on the screen. So, for example, the action that we mentioned about the council taking action to tackle food swamps and food deserts. One example of evidence is this Canadian case study that showed that exposure to junk food outlets had a significant effect on a child's likelihood of making a junk food purchase, therefore recommending policies to restrict junk food outlets outside of schools, for instance. So this shows the link between a certain action, a certain policy implemented locally, and a wider goal, a wider meta indicator. So what we essentially tried to do was to find an innovative way of undertaking impact assessment, but without going down the road of quantifiable measurements. So in addition to this kind of more research-based evidence, we added a series of case studies. So we attached to each action a series of case studies, because we wanted on one hand to use the evidence to be able to make the case towards decision makers that this was a good thing to do, undertake these actions, so to encourage action. And on the other hand, to show that it's already been done somewhere else, that it's possible. So, for example, the case studies we would give is, for instance, Leicester City Council, who introduced a street trading policy to prevent burger vans, trading outside of schools. So the aim was kind of to get all of these different aspects to work together to make the case for action on a place-based systems approach to food, and essentially make the case for the work of the local food partnerships. So as you will have understood, the actual measuring of the impact in a quantitative way is very much a work in progress. We did start identifying potential measurements and also data collection methods. So some of them are listed here, but it's very much a work in progress. And the reason for this is that we didn't consider it as a priority at the time because we knew that there wouldn't be the resources locally to collect the data, to exploit it, and to etc. It's worth mentioning that the toolbox wasn't used in its current form because, as you can see, it's still very much kind of a draft. But we only had 1 year's funding to do this, so we could only go so far. So we didn't get to do the next step of actually making a public-facing tool or document, but the content of it has been used since to fuel the argumentation of local food partnerships in their work, and all of the evidence, all of the case studies are available in open source on the Sustainable Food Places website in the resources section to help kind of to help local partnerships in their to advance in their local projects. So maybe just to wrap up, the work undertaken in this project was the object of a paper. So I've just put the reference here. The second link is the draft toolkit. So if you want to go and see what the table looks like in full, because it's much longer than what I was able to present this afternoon, and with all of the kind of the background, the methodology, how we did the workshops, etc. This is all available in this draft toolkit. And lastly, I wanted to put the link to this other evaluation work that we undertook since, this time with the University of the West of England, based in Bristol. This one was very much a health-focused impact assessment, and it was based on a number of interviews with public health professionals to try and get their assessment of sustainable food cities, now called Sustainable Food Places. And this document is much more public facing, and it was largely used by the network, by the local members, the local partnerships in making the case locally, making the health case, let's say, for a place-based approach to food and the work they were doing. So yeah, I encourage you to go and find out more about this one. It's quite a short document. So there you go. Thank you very much for your attention. I'll wrap up here, and I'll stick around for any questions. Thank you.